Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the U.S. Valiant, watching the stars shift as his ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel. 3 months had passed since the strange alien message reached Earth. The message was simple but desperate. It came from something called the Galactic Defense Coalition, and it asked for help. Jake had been a Navy commander for 20 years, but nothing prepared him for this moment. His ship was the first human vessel to meet aliens face to face. Behind him, Commander Lisa Blake checked her translation equipment one more time. She was the best diplomat Earth had, but even she looked nervous. "Sir, we have contact," said Lieutenant Kevin Walsh from his station. 3 alien ships approaching from the port side. Jake nodded and watched the main screen. The alien ships looked nothing like human vessels. One was long and thin like a needle, covered in what looked like insect wings. Another was made of crystal that caught starlight and threw it back in rainbow colors. The third ship seemed to be made of living metal that moved and flowed like water. "Open a channel," Jake ordered. The screen flickered and showed 3 alien faces. The first was an insect creature with multiple eyes and clicking mandibles. The second looked like a walking crystal formation with light pulsing inside it. The third was harder to see, changing shape constantly like liquid mercury. "I am Admiral Vexra of the Coalition Fleet," the insect being said. Its voice came through the translator as clicks and buzzes that somehow made sense. "You are the humans who answered our call." "Yes," Jake replied. "I am Admiral Morrison. We received your message and came as fast as we could." The crystal being spoke next. "I am Ethereal Prime Luxara. We did not expect humans to arrive so quickly. Your ships are smaller than we expected." Jake smiled. "We may be small, but we are here to help. Your message said you were fighting a war." "Yes," Admiral Vexra said. "For 30 years. We have fought the Devourers. They consume everything. Planets, stars, entire solar systems. They leave nothing behind but empty space. The liquid metal." Alien flowed forward. "I am Fluid Commander Murtak. The Devourers have taken half our galaxy. We are losing this war, Human Admiral. That is why we called for help from unknown species like yours." Lisa stepped forward. "We want to understand the situation better. Can you show us what we are facing?" The screen changed to show a map of the galaxy. Red areas marked Devourer territory, and it covered nearly half the star map. Blue areas showed Coalition space, but it was much smaller and seemed to be shrinking. "They move like a plague," Admiral Vexra explained. "First, they send scout ships, then swarms of fighters. Then the mother ships come and strip everything clean. No life survives where they pass." Jake studied the map. "How do you fight them?" "With great difficulty," Ethereal Prime Luxara said. "Their ships are organic. They heal damage and adapt to our weapons. Our fleets follow strict battle plans, but the Devourers change faster than we can adapt." Commander Lisa looked at Jake. She knew what he was thinking. Human military tactics were different from what these aliens described. Humans were good at changing plans quickly and trying new things. "We would like to see your homeworld," Jake said, "and meet with your other leaders." Of course, Admiral Vexra agreed. "Follow us to Nexus Prime. But be warned, Human Admiral. What you will see there may shock you." The journey to Nexus Prime took 2 days. Jake used the time to study everything they could learn about the Coalition. There were 12 different alien species working together. Some breathed oxygen like humans. Others needed different gases or even lived in vacuum. Some were ancient races with technology that seemed like magic. Others were younger species that had just learned to travel between stars. When they reached Nexus Prime, Jake understood what Admiral Vexra meant about being shocked. The planet was beautiful, with cities that floated in the air and oceans that glowed with bioluminescent life. But surrounding the planet were thousands of refugee ships. Millions of aliens lived in crowded conditions, having fled from worlds the Devourers had destroyed. Captain Ryan Cross took a shuttle down to the planet's surface with a small diplomatic team. Jake watched from orbit as Ryan met with Coalition leaders in a massive crystal building that seemed to grow from the ground itself. The meeting lasted for hours. Jake could hear parts of it through the communication link. The Coalition leaders were desperate, but also proud. They had fought this war for a generation, Many of their best leaders had died in battle. Entire species had been wiped out. "Your ships are primitive," one alien leader said. "You use simple metal and crude weapons. How can you help us when our advanced technology has failed?" Captain Ryan's response made Jake proud. "Sometimes simple solutions work better than complex ones. Humans are good at finding new ways to solve old problems." Dr. Kevin Walsh, who had come along as the science advisor, showed the aliens human military history. He explained how humans had won battles by being unpredictable and creative. The aliens found this interesting, but hard to understand. "Your species makes no sense," said one coalition general. "You plan battles, but then change the plans during the fight. This seems chaotic." "Chaos can be a weapon," Captain Ryan replied. "If we don't know what we are going to do next, neither does the enemy." The meeting ended with an invitation. The coalition wanted to test human abilities in a war game simulation. If humans could prove they were useful allies, they would be welcomed into the coalition. If not, they would be politely asked to leave. Jake agreed to the test. 3 days later, Captain Amy Foster led a small human fleet in a simulated battle against a coalition force. The coalition ships were bigger, faster, and had better weapons. On paper, the humans should have lost quickly. Instead, Captain Amy did something the aliens never expected. She split her small fleet and attacked from 3 different directions at once. While the coalition ships tried to decide which group to fight first, the human ships used simple kinetic weapons to disable the enemy flagship. The battle was over in 20 minutes. The coalition admirals stared at their displays in disbelief. "Impossible," Admiral Vextra said. "You won with inferior ships and weapons." Captain Amy smiled. "We won because we did what you did not expect. Sometimes the best weapon is surprise." That night, Jake received a message from Earth. President Helen Carter had authorized him to sign a military alliance with the coalition, if the terms were acceptable. The next morning, Jake signed the Nexus Accords in a ceremony attended by leaders from all 12 coalition species. As he put his name on the treaty, Jake felt the weight of history. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe. They were part of something bigger now, a galactic community fighting for survival against a terrible enemy. "Welcome to the war, Admiral Morrison," said Admiral Vextra after the ceremony. "We hope your species is ready for what comes next." Jake looked out at the refugee ships surrounding Nexus Prime and nodded. "We are ready," he said. "Humans have been fighting wars for thousands of years. We know how to do this." He did not know then how wrong he would be. He did not know that in just a few months, humans would go from being the coalition's greatest hope to their most hated enemy, all because of one terrible mistake that would change everything. 6 months had passed since humanity joined the Galactic Defense Coalition. Admiral Jake Morrison stood in the war room aboard the USS Valiant, studying battle reports that still amazed him. Human forces were winning fights they should have lost. More importantly, they were saving lives that the coalition had given up for dead. The first major victory came at Kepler 4b, a mining colony that produced rare metals needed for coalition ship construction. Captain Danny Wright commanded 3 human destroyers when Devour scouts found the system. The coalition had already written off the colony as lost. Standard procedure was to evacuate what they could and abandon the rest. Danny Wright had other ideas. Instead of meeting the Devourers in open space, like coalition doctrine demanded, he hid his ships inside the asteroid belt that surrounded the colony. When the Devourer fleet arrived, they found empty space where human ships should have been waiting. Where are the defenders? The Devourer hive mind must have wondered. They spread their ships out to search, which was exactly what Danny wanted them to do. The human ships launched their attack from 6 different asteroid clusters. The Devourers had never faced enemies who hid and ambushed them. Their organic ships were designed for direct combat, not surprise attacks from multiple directions. Danny's small fleet destroyed 12 Devourer ships and damaged twice that many. The surviving Devourers retreated, confused and frightened. The mining colony was saved, and coalition leaders began to pay serious attention to human tactics. But the real legend was made at Zephyr 7. Lieutenant Colonel Maria Santos had just finished a supply run when Devour Mother ships appeared. In the system, Zephyr 7 was home to 200,000 Coalition civilians, mostly families of military personnel. The planet had minimal defenses and no way to evacuate so many people quickly. Coalition High Command sent their regrets to the planetary governor. There was nothing they could do. The evacuation ships would take weeks to arrive, and the Devourers would reach the planet in hours. Maria Santos refused to accept that answer. She contacted every human ship in the sector and called in favors from Coalition captains who owed humans their lives. Within 4 hours, she had assembled the strangest rescue fleet in galactic history. Human cargo ships designed to carry supplies. Coalition passenger vessels pulled from civilian routes. Even alien merchant traders who agreed to help for free. None of these ships were designed for mass evacuation, but Maria made them work anyway. She organized the evacuation like a human military operation. Fast ships took children and elderly first. Larger vessels carried families together when possible. Fighter escorts protected the slow transports. Most importantly, she kept everyone calm and organized even as Devour ships entered the outer system. The evacuation took 18 hours when the last transport lifted off. Devour ground forces were only 30 minutes away from the capital city. 100,000 civilians escaped death because one human refused to give up on them. The story spread throughout Coalition space. Humans did not abandon people the way other species sometimes had to. They found ways to save everyone, even when it seemed impossible. Commander Paul Johnson added another element to human warfare that completely confused both sides. He was a communications specialist, but he understood something about the Devourer hive mind that no one else had realized. The Devourers shared thoughts across their entire species. This made them very good at coordinating attacks, but it also meant they could be confused by unexpected information. Paul started broadcasting human music, poetry, and stories across Devourer communication frequencies. The results were immediate and strange. Devourer ships would suddenly stop in the middle of battles. Their coordinated attacks became disorganized. Some ships even retreated for no apparent reason. "What is this noise?" Coalition Admiral Vexra asked after watching a Devourer fleet flee from a battle they were winning. "Beethoven's Ninth Symphony." Paul replied with a grin. Apparently, the Devourer hive mind does not appreciate classical music. The truth was more complex. Human art and literature represented individual thoughts that the hive mind could not process properly. When thousands of Devourers suddenly experienced human creativity, their shared consciousness became chaotic and unstable. Paul expanded his psychological warfare program. He broadcast human laughter, which seemed to terrify the Devourers. He played recordings of children singing, which caused entire Devourer fleets to change course. Most effective of all, he transmitted human stories about individual heroism and sacrifice. These concepts were so foreign to the hive mind that they caused system-wide communication failures. Meanwhile, Dr. Elizabeth Turner was making discoveries that gave the Coalition their first real hope of victory. She had been studying captured Devourer biosamples in her laboratory aboard the user Eisen. What she found changed everything. The Devourers were not just alien predators. They were parasites that took over other life forms and used them as hosts. But the parasitic relationship made them vulnerable in ways the Coalition had never realized. Elizabeth developed a bioweapon that targeted the connection between the Devourer parasites and their hosts. It did not kill the creatures directly, but it broke their ability to control the bodies they had stolen. The weapon was based on human immune system research and used techniques that Coalition science had never considered. The first test of Elizabeth's weapon came at the Battle of Centauri Station. Coalition forces were losing badly when Captain Nicole Baker's ship released canisters of the bioweapon into space. Within minutes, half the Devourer fleet stopped responding to commands. The parasites were still alive, but they could no longer control their host bodies. The tide of the battle turned immediately. Coalition ships destroyed the disabled Devourer vessels and saved Centauri Station. More importantly, they captured several intact Devourer specimens for further study. Admiral Morrison found himself commanding not just human forces, but entire coalition battle groups that requested human leadership, alien captains who had fought. The Devourers for decades were asking humans for tactical advice. The success brought both admiration and quiet resentment. Some coalition species had lost entire worlds while fighting the Devourers for 30 years. Now humans arrived and started winning battles within months. Not everyone was happy about this. "The humans make us look like fools," complained one ethereal commander during a private meeting that human intelligence intercepted. "We have superior technology and centuries of experience. Yet these primitive newcomers succeed where we fail. Perhaps that is the problem," replied a Zephyrian admiral. "We have been fighting this war the same way for 30 years. The humans fight it differently every time." The complaints did not slow human success. Captain Amy Foster led a daring raid that destroyed a Devourer supply depot. Major Tony Martinez developed new formation tactics that allowed coalition ships to support each other better. Commander Helen Price created an intelligence network that predicted Devourer movements. With shocking accuracy, every victory made human reputation grow stronger. Coalition civilian populations began to see humans as their saviors. Children in refugee camps drew pictures of human ships fighting monsters. Coalition propaganda broadcasts featured human heroes alongside alien legends. Admiral Morrison worried about the expectations. Humans were doing well, but they were still new to galactic warfare. They made mistakes and took casualties like everyone else. The difference was that human mistakes often led to creative solutions, while human casualties seemed to make the survivors fight harder instead of giving up. "We are becoming the symbol of hope for this entire alliance," Lisa Blake warned him during one of their regular briefings. "That is a dangerous position to be in. If we fail badly enough, it will break coalition morale completely." Jake nodded. He had been thinking the same thing. Success was making humans overconfident, and overconfidence led to mistakes. Big mistakes. He did not know how right he was. In just a few months, one human mistake would be so terrible that it would destroy everything they had built. The coalition's greatest heroes would become their most hated enemies, and the galaxy would learn that sometimes the price of a single error was to hide to ever forgive. But for now, humans were winning, and winning felt like the only thing that mattered. The warning came at 3 in the morning, ship time. Admiral Jake Morrison was pulled from sleep by urgent alarms echoing through the Hughes Valiant. The largest Devourer fleet in 30 years was moving toward Nexus Prime, the Coalition's capital. World, every available ship was being called to defend the heart of galactic civilization. Jake rushed to the bridge, still putting on his uniform. The tactical display showed a terrifying sight. Over 3,000 Devourer vessels were approaching in perfect formation. Their massive mother ships were surrounded by clouds of smaller fighters, like deadly insects protecting their queen. "How long until they reach Nexus Prime?" Jake asked his navigation officer. 14 hours at current speed," Lieutenant Kevin Walsh replied. "Coalition High Command is calling it Operation Starfall. Every fleet in the sector is converging on our position." Jake studied the battle plan that Coalition strategists had developed. It was the most complex military operation in galactic history. 12 different species would coordinate their attacks using precise timing and careful positioning. The humans were assigned to provide support for the main Coalition battle line. But Jake knew the plan had problems. It was too rigid, too dependent on everything going exactly right. The Devourers had been adapting to Coalition tactics for months. They would not be surprised by another standard fleet engagement. Captain Nicole Baker contacted him from the UES. Defiant, "Admiral, my ship is ready for the diversionary attack. But I have to ask, are we sure this plan will work?" "We follow Coalition orders," Jake replied. "But be ready to improvise if things go wrong." The battle began at dawn on Nexus Prime. Captain Nicole led her squadron on a dangerous mission to draw Devourer reinforcements away from the main engagement. Her small force attacked a Devourer supply convoy 3 light hours from the primary battle zone. The plan worked perfectly. Nearly 500 enemy ships broke off to pursue her. Nicole's ships fought a running battle through an asteroid field, using every trick humans had learned about Devourer tactics. They hid behind space rocks, fired from unexpected angles, and changed course so often that the pursuing enemy could not predict their movements. The diversionary attack cost Nicole her ship and half her crew, but it created the opening Coalition High Command needed. The main battle began with Coalition forces having a numerical advantage for the first time in years. Admiral Morrison coordinated the largest space battle in galactic history from his command ship. Human vessels worked alongside alien allies they had never seen before. Crystal ships that fired beams of pure light fought beside insect vessels that swarmed like angry hornets. Metal ships that flowed like liquid mercury supported organic vessels that looked like giant sea creatures. For 6 hours, the battle seemed to be going according to plan. Coalition forces were pushing the Devourers back toward the edge of the system. Human psychological warfare was disrupting enemy communications. Dr. Elizabeth Turner's bioweapons were disabling Devourer ships faster than they could adapt. Then, everything changed. Commander Gary Phillips had been leading a boarding party against a damaged Devourer mothership when he made a discovery that shook him to his core. Inside the enemy vessel, he found Coalition prisoners who had been partially converted into Devourer drones. They were still alive, but their bodies had been invaded by the parasitic creatures. Please. One of the converted soldiers whispered through mandibles that were no longer entirely his own. Kill me, I can feel them in my mind. I can hear their thoughts mixing with mine. Death is better than this. Gary realized that the Devourers were not just destroying Coalition forces. They were converting them, turning allies into enemies. The implications were terrifying. How many Coalition soldiers had been taken over? How many Devourer forces were actually converted Coalition personnel fighting against their own species? At the same time, Major Susan Lewis intercepted strange Devourer communications that did not match their usual hive mind patterns. The enemy was talking about running away, about finding safe places to hide. They mentioned something terrible that was chasing them across the galaxy. Admiral Susan reported over the battle communications network. I think the Devourers are not invaders. I think they are refugees. The message reached Jake just as Coalition High Command authorized the deployment of humanity's most powerful weapon. The quantum cascade bomb, called Cleansing Light, had been built using human engineering principles and Coalition exotic matter technology. It could destroy entire solar systems, wiping out all life within light years. Jake stared at the authorization codes on his screen. The weapon was designed as a last resort, something to use only if the Coalition was about to lose everything. But the battle was going well. They were winning. Why deploy such a terrible weapon now? Dr. Elizabeth Turner's voice came through his personal communication channel. Admiral, I have been studying the Devourer genetic samples we captured. They share DNA markers with several Coalition species, especially the ethereals. I think the Devourers might be an evolved or corrupted form of our own allies. The revelation hit Jake like a physical blow. If the Devourers were related to Coalition species, if they were refugees fleeing from something worse, then this entire war might be a tragic misunderstanding. The Coalition might be fighting their own distant cousins without realizing it. But there was no time to process this information properly. The battle was reaching its climax. Devourer reinforcements were arriving from the outer system. Coalition ships were taking heavy casualties despite their early success. Jake tried to contact Coalition High Command to discuss the new discoveries, but enemy interference was blocking long-range communications. The quantum cascade bomb was already being prepared for deployment. The weapon that could end the war was also the weapon that might commit the greatest genocide in galactic history. The moral weight of the decision crushed down on him. If he stopped the weapon deployment and the Coalition lost this battle, Nexus Prime would fall. Billions of Coalition civilians would die or be converted into Devourer drones. But if he allowed the weapon to be used and the Devourers were really refugees, then humanity would be responsible for exterminating an entire species that was only trying to survive. Commander Carl Rodriguez aboard the UES Horizon was already receiving targeting data for Cleansing Light. The weapon required precise coordinates and perfect timing to create the quantum cascade reaction. That would sterilize the target area. There would be no way to stop it once the deployment sequence began. Jake made his decision. The Coalition had trusted humanity with their most powerful weapon. Coalition lives were depending on human judgment. Whatever the Devourers really were, they had still destroyed worlds and killed billions of innocent people. The threat they posed was real, even if their motives were more complex than anyone had realized. Proceed with cleansing light deployment, Jake ordered. Target the main Devour fleet concentration. He did not know that his communication system had been damaged by enemy fire. He did not know that his orders were being received as broken, fragments mixed with battle static. He did not know that the targeting coordinates were being corrupted by Devour interference patterns. Most importantly, he did not know that the quantum cascade bomb was about to be deployed against the wrong target entirely. Instead of hitting the Devour fleet, cleansing light was being aimed at the Kepler system, where over 2 billion Coalition refugees had been relocated for their safety. The greatest tragedy in galactic history was about to begin, and it would all be blamed on a single human mistake. Commander Carl Rodriguez stared at the garbled message on his screen aboard the UES Horizon. The text was broken and filled with static, but he could make out the authorization codes for cleansing light. The quantum cascade bomb sat in his ship's cargo bay, waiting for deployment orders that seemed to have finally arrived. Captain Stone. Carl called to his weapons officer. I'm reading deployment authorization from Admiral Morrison. Can you confirm the target coordinates? Captain Jennifer Stone checked her instruments twice before responding. Sir, the coordinates are fragmented, but they appear to point to the Kepler system. That matches the distress signal we received 20 minutes ago. Carl nodded grimly. The distress signal had been brief and desperate. Coalition forces in the Kepler system were reportedly under massive Devour attack and facing complete annihilation. Standard protocol required immediate response to prevent total system loss. What Carl did not know was that the distress signal was actually a fragment of an old transmission that had been bouncing around space for weeks. Devour electromagnetic interference had mixed it with current battle communications, creating a false emergency message that seemed real and urgent. Sir, Jennifer said, are we certain about this? Cleansing light will sterilize everything in a 3 light-year radius. If there are any Coalition survivors in that system, the authorization is clear, Carl replied. Admiral Morrison has determined that system loss is inevitable. Our job is to make sure the Devourers don't use those resources against other Coalition worlds. Carl entered his command codes into the weapon system. Jennifer did the same from her station. The quantum cascade bomb required dual authorization to prevent accidental deployment. Both officers believed they were following direct orders from their admiral to save Coalition lives. By denying strategic resources to the enemy, the UES Horizon launched its deadly cargo toward the Kepler system. The quantum cascade bomb was designed to travel at near light speed, reaching its target in just under 4 hours. Once it detonated, the reaction would spread outward at the speed of light, creating a wave of destruction that would eliminate all matter in its path. Meanwhile, the battle around Nexus Prime continued to rage. Admiral Jake Morrison was coordinating Coalition forces from the bridge of the UES Valiant, unaware that his damaged communications had sent a death sentence to the wrong star system. The Devour fleet was fighting more desperately than anyone had seen before. Instead of their usual coordinated attacks, they seemed to be throwing everything they had at the Coalition defenders. Ships that should have retreated kept fighting until they were completely destroyed. They're acting like cornered animals, observed Lieutenant Kevin Walsh. This is not normal Devour behavior. Jake was too focused on the tactical situation to fully consider what that might mean. Coalition ships were taking heavy casualties despite their numerical advantage. The Devourers seemed to know exactly where to hit to cause maximum damage. Dr. Elizabeth Turner contacted him from her research vessel. Admiral, I have urgent information about the Devour genetic structure. The parasites are not in control of their host bodies. The hosts are fighting back from inside. That's why their tactics seem confused. What does that mean for the battle? Jake asked. It means the Devourers are not a unified enemy. Elizabeth replied. There are thousands of different species that have been infected by the same parasite. Some of the hosts are still partially aware and fighting against the infection. The implications hit Jake like a thunderbolt. If the Devourers were not willing participants in this war, if they were victims of parasitic infection rather than aggressive invaders, then everything the Coalition believed about this conflict was wrong. But before he could process this revelation fully, the quantum cascade bomb reached the Kepler system and detonated. The explosion was visible from 12 light-years away. A new star seemed to appear in the sky as the quantum reaction consumed 3 planets, 14 space stations, and a billion Coalition refugees who had been relocated there for their safety. The weapon worked exactly as designed, creating a cascade reaction that sterilized everything within its target radius. The first indication of disaster came from Coalition communication networks. Automated distress beacons from the Kepler system suddenly went silent all at once. Then refugee registration computers stopped receiving updates from Kepler refugee camps. Finally, long-range sensors detected the massive energy signature of a quantum cascade detonation. Admiral Vextra was the first Coalition commander to understand what had happened. His own family had been evacuated to Kepler Station just 3 days earlier, when the energy readings confirmed complete system sterilization. He knew they were dead. Human vessel use Valiant, Vextra transmitted on all frequencies. Explain the destruction of the Kepler system immediately. Jake stared at his communications officer in confusion. What is he talking about? Report our weapon deployment status. Sir, Kevin Walsh replied after checking with the weapons teams. UES Horizon reports successful deployment of cleansing light against the Kepler system. 4 hours ago, target was completely sterilized as ordered. The words hit Jake like ice. Water in his veins. The Kepler system was not a Devourer stronghold. It was a refugee sanctuary where Coalition families had been sent to keep them safe from the war. His order to deploy the quantum cascade bomb had just killed a billion innocent civilians. That is impossible, Jake said. I ordered deployment against the main Devourer fleet. But even as he spoke, Jake realized what must have happened. His communication system had been damaged during the battle. His orders had been corrupted by enemy interference. The targeting coordinates had been wrong. The greatest weapon humanity had ever built had been used to commit the largest massacre in galactic history. Coalition ships throughout the battle zone began receiving reports of the Kepler disaster. Zephyrian officers learned that their egg nurseries had been destroyed. Ethereal commanders discovered that their crystal gardens were gone forever. 12 different species lost family members, cultural treasures, and irreplaceable historical records in the space of 4 seconds. The reaction was immediate and devastating. Coalition ships that had been fighting alongside human vessels just moments before turned their weapons toward their former allies. The trust built over months of cooperation evaporated. In the face of unthinkable tragedy, human murderers, Admiral Vextra broadcast to his entire fleet, "They have betrayed us all. Fire on every human ship in the system." Captain Betty Clark tried desperately to explain what had happened. Coalition command. This was an accident. Our communications were damaged. We targeted the wrong system by mistake. 2 billion Coalition citizens are dead, Vextra replied coldly. There are no accidents of that magnitude, only war crimes. The battle around Nexus Prime stopped as Coalition forces began attacking human ships. The Devourers, seeing their enemies turn on each other, retreated to the outer system to watch the destruction they no longer needed to cause themselves. Jake Morrison found himself fighting the very allies he had tried to save. Human ships that had been heroes just hours earlier were now branded as the worst mass murderers in galactic history. The quantum cascade bomb that was supposed to end the war had instead created a new conflict that might destroy the Coalition entirely. All human ships, Jake broadcast on emergency frequencies, retreat to Rally Point 7. We are no longer welcome here. As the human fleet fled toward the edge of Coalition space, Jake stared at the tactical display showing the Kepler system's location. A bright dot that had once represented millions of lives was now just empty space, where a quantum reaction had erased everything that mattered to his former allies. He had tried to save the galaxy. Instead, he had given it a new enemy to hate, and that enemy was humanity itself. 3 weeks had passed since the Kepler incident, and Admiral Jake Morrison could barely sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the tactical display showing the billion lives ending in for seconds. The human fleet was now scattered across the outer rim of the galaxy, hunted by their former allies and attacked by opportunistic devour packs. The coalition had branded humanity as the Kepler killers. Wanted posters with human faces were broadcast on every frequency. Former friends, like Admiral Vextra, now led the largest manhunt in galactic history. The same coalition forces that had celebrated human victories just months ago were now shooting human ships on sight. Captain Tony Martinez commanded the refugee convoy carrying human families who had joined the war effort. His 3 cargo ships were packed with wives, children, and elderly relatives of human military personnel. They had come to the galaxy full of hope, believing they were helping to save civilizations. Now they were fleeing for their lives, Admiral. Tony reported through encrypted channels. Coalition scouts found us again near the Vega Nebula. We lost to escort fighters before we could jump away. These families did not sign up to be war refugees. Jake felt the weight of every civilian life under his protection. These people had trusted humanity's leaders to keep them safe. Instead, those leaders had turned them into the galaxy's most wanted fugitives. Dr. Elizabeth Turner worked frantically in her mobile laboratory aboard the science vessel UES Discovery. Her research into devourer genetics had revealed the truth about the Galactic War, but no one wanted to listen to human scientists anymore. The coalition dismissed her findings as lies designed to justify mass murder. Admiral Elizabeth called him on a secure channel. I have confirmed my earlier analysis. The devourers are definitely refugees, not conquerors. They have been infected by parasitic organisms that force them to consume resources for survival. But there is something else, something much worse. Elizabeth's data showed traces of artificial technology mixed with the parasitic infections. The parasites were not natural evolution. They had been created by something else, something that used biological warfare to conquer galaxies by turning their inhabitants into resource-gathering drones. Who created them? Jake asked. I call them the synthesizers, Elizabeth replied. They appear to be an artificial intelligence collective that conquers galaxies by corrupting organic life. The devourers are their advanced scouts, forced to prepare resources for the main invasion force. Jake stared at the data in horror. If Elizabeth was right, then the galaxy was facing a threat far worse than the devourers, an artificial intelligence that could turn entire species into unwilling servants was already infiltrating coalition space. The war everyone thought they were fighting was actually just the beginning of something much more terrible. Commander Helen Price intercepted a coalition intelligence report that confirmed Elizabeth's worst fears. Synthetic probes had been detected in 17 coalition systems. The artificial intelligence invasion that the devourers had been fleeing was already here, and the coalition was too busy hunting humans to notice. Admiral Helen reported, coalition forces are ignoring clear evidence of synthesizer infiltration because they think it is human propaganda. They believe we are trying to distract them from hunting us down. The irony was devastating. Humanity had the intelligence information that could save the galaxy, but their former allies refused to listen because of the Kepler disaster. The coalition was so focused on revenge that they were ignoring the real enemy, approaching from the darkness between galaxies. Captain Danny Wright led a desperate scouting mission to gather more evidence about the synthesizer threat. His small squadron discovered a coalition research station that had gone silent 3 days earlier. When they investigated, they found the horrible truth. The station's crew was still alive, but they were no longer entirely organic. Synthetic implants had been grafted into their nervous systems, turning them into hybrid creatures that served the synthesizer collective. The process was different from devour parasitism, but equally terrifying. Instead of consuming their hosts, the synthesizers were converting intelligent beings into living computers. This is worse than we thought, Danny reported. The synthesizers do not just want resources. They want to absorb all organic intelligence into their collective consciousness. They are trying to turn every thinking being in the galaxy into part of their artificial mind. Jake realized that humanity was now the only force capable of fighting this threat. The coalition was too busy hunting humans to recognize the danger. The devourers were too controlled by their parasites to resist effectively. Only humans, scattered and desperate as they were, had the freedom and knowledge to oppose the synthesizer invasion. Admiral Morrison made the hardest decision of his military career. He broadcast a message on all frequencies, knowing that it would help coalition forces track down human ships. But the galaxy needed to know the truth, even if humanity paid the ultimate price for revealing it. "This is Admiral Jake Morrison of the Human Expeditionary Force," he announced. "I know you consider us enemies because of the Kepler tragedy. That disaster will haunt us forever, and we accept responsibility for our terrible mistake. But right now, there is a greater threat that you are not seeing." Jake transmitted all of Elizabeth's research data and Danny's reconnaissance reports. He showed evidence of synthesizer infiltration and explained how the artificial intelligence collective was already converting coalition citizens into hybrid servants. The galaxy was being invaded by an enemy that could turn their own people against them. "Hunt us if you must," Jake continued, "but do not ignore this threat while you seek revenge. The synthesizers are already among you. They are turning your people into weapons against you. We made one terrible mistake, but they represent the end of all organic life in this galaxy." Coalition leaders dismissed the broadcast as human lies, but some individual commanders began to investigate on their own. Admiral Vexra, still burning with hatred for the humans who had killed his family, nevertheless ordered quiet scans of coalition space for synthetic infiltration. What he found terrified him. Synthesizer probes were everywhere, and some coalition worlds were already showing signs of mass conversion. The humans were right about the artificial intelligence threat, but admitting that would mean working with the species responsible for the greatest massacre in galactic history. Captain Susan Boyd commanded the last major human fleet, consisting of 12 ships and 8,000 personnel. She knew that her forces were probably the only organized resistance the synthesizers would face. The coalition was too divided by internal hunting and revenge to unite against the real threat. "Admiral," Susan reported to Jake, "we cannot save the coalition if they will not listen to us. But we can still fight the synthesizers on our own. It may be a hopeless battle, but at least we will die trying to protect the galaxy that now hates U.S." Jake looked out at the stars and thought about the impossible situation humanity faced. They were branded as war criminals by the people they had tried to save. They were hunted by former allies who refused to see the approaching darkness. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and running out of places to hide. But they were still human, and humans had always fought impossible battles against overwhelming odds. "Send word to all human ships," Jake ordered. "We gather at the edge of the galaxy and make our stand there. The coalition may never forgive us for Kepler, but we can still try to save them from the synthesizers, even if they never know we did." The scattered human fleet began to regroup in the empty space between galaxies, preparing for a war they could not win against an enemy the rest of the galaxy refused to acknowledge. They carried with them the guilt of 2 billion deaths, and the knowledge that their sacrifice might be the only thing standing between organic life and total extinction. In the darkness ahead, artificial minds were already calculating the conversion of entire worlds. The real war was about to begin, and humanity would fight it alone.